In the quiet of the evening, where shadows softly play, a fairy tale wolf sheds his skin, gently drifting away, with a twinkle in his eye and a heart full of dreams. He waits for the Friday night glow, where the magic redeems. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. He picks up a book, the pages worn and wise, every line a whisper under the vast skies, from far off lands where the wild things roam, to enchanted forests where the heart finds home. Oh, the wolf in the moonlight, he's found his true call, reading tales of wonder for one and for all. In a world of stars dancing, his spirit takes flight, with stories of beauty under the starlit night. With every word he reads, he casts a spell of peace, transporting all who listen to a land where joy won't cease. For in these fairy tales, amidst the laughter and tears, the wolf finds his solace, he conquers his fears. As the night grows deeper, he serenades the moon with melodies that linger, a soft and soothing tune. In this sacred hour, where magic abounds.
Well, Twitch is pulling its normal bullshit again. I ran the 3 minutes of ads, and then at the last minute, they decide to run their 3 minutes of ads. So, there's still another minute and 45 seconds of ads, because Twitch decided to throw on some editors. Of course, it would help if they would stop running ads 2 minutes into the stream, as opposed to the 1 minute where I told them, because I started my ads at 1 minute after the stream started. And even then, pre-roll is supposed to be turned off, because I'm rolling my own ads. But no, Twitch has to be its normal pain-in-the-ass self. But anyway, hi Cubs. Well, at least those of you who may be subscribed, or maybe Twitch is being nice and putting it as a side screen ad. I don't know. Very unlikely. Well, that's funny. Kel is somehow just now getting my streak. She's my mod. She's here every time. Why is Twitch just now acknowledging it? I'm a mod on another channel and I'm at 150 stream streak. Oh well. It is Friday the 13th, so expecting things to go right isn't exactly customary. I forgot to turn on my fairy light just to make sure. But yay, Kel is at a 10 stream streak. For some reason, it's only a 10 stream, even though she literally posts every what do I want to say, episode. But she's here every day. She's the one who does my ads and everything else. Okay, well, welcome in everyone else who got to sit through the extra 2 minutes of ads, because they started their ads 2 minutes after I'd started mine. But I hope everyone's had a good week. It is Friday the 13th, and there is a cat already asleep. I will try not to wake her, because she's such an adorable ball of fur. But we are doing more fairy tales tonight. Hopefully, nothing too overlong like the cowboy stories last night. We'll see if we can get 4 or 5 stories done tonight. Let's see. Got 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 4 stories with this. Over 20 pages. So not that bad. So if we do 5 stories, it'll get us past the first page of the table of contents. If we do 6, we'll be started on the second. And 5 stories will get us 30 pages. Well, it may not be too bad. I don't know how many pictures are in it, so... But again, this is the last of the color-themed fairy books. I do have another fairy book that you did, actually like 3rd or 4th in the series, but you didn't give it a color. But I'll probably do that one after this. I'm not sure if I would consider Arabian Nights Entertainment part of the fairy story series, because it was written to be separate. But I may include it in the Friday Night Fairy Tale series anyway. It just won't be part of the... Well, I don't know if I'll include it in the Andrew Lane Fairy Stories book or not. But... it doesn't look like anyone's coming in yet. Which is fine. Everyone will be able to watch it on the VODs. So, does my voice sound weird? Because listening to my VODs the past few days, it's been sounding a little strange. I tend to look at filters maybe a little bit more. As I don't need it on the game. Oh, well. That would make a difference. How does it sound? That is true. It does sound a little off to me too, though. Trying to see if there's anything I can adjust on it to change that. I don't really want the game to be up as high as it is. But welcome in since it's your first time. Well, right now I'm sitting... Oh, I'm actually leaning back in my chair, so I'm probably just under 3 feet away from my microphone. And my microphone is in a box with sound film around it. So it's probably adding a lot to the game. Of course, I don't really have a fancy microphone either. I just have one that I literally paid $1 for. It might be. Let me see if I can change that. Let's see. Sound settings. Microphone settings. Yeah, using the headset is a lot easier, but it tends to muffle things a little bit more. I just turned down the sensitivity of my microphone. Well, now you get to hear the fairy tales in the morning, Guilty. Okay, raising my voice a little. Let's see if I can do that just a bit. Because when I'm doing fairy tales, I try to just use my regular reading voice. That's the wrong thing. I kind of want my mic to stay in the high green. Let's see, this is about as loud as I normally talk. Which may mean I need to boost the gain back up since I cut it some. Let's see, where does this put me? It has me staying in the 10s. Okay, well, it would be my usual self and say, I can fix it in post. But the present microphone does tend to need to be loud enough so people can actually hear me. Because if I ever do my old microphone test where I'm just holding out the extended vowel, I usually try to set my level by that. But this is also without the book in front of me. I try to hold it down so it doesn't block the microphone any. But it tends to anyway. It's if I were just to hold the See, that's what I was thinking about it, because there's a 12-book series that's literally the fairy books, but they're listed by color. So I'm trying to figure out if I want to add that to that series, because it was written in between some of the fairy book series. So I think it was maybe like the 4th book written, but it wasn't listed under the series. So I'm wondering if I should go ahead and keep it separate. I'll get it to when I can, Guilty. Or haven't I sent you a book? Or do I not have your address either? The version I'm currently reading is translations that were slightly softened off of the Brothers Grimm, but the first 1 or 2 series of Friday Night Fairy Tales, I read the Jack Zipe translations, so there was nothing held back from those. But the Fairy Book series is collections that Andrew Lang edited, his wife and other authors translated, and gave her permission to publish. So some of the stories are as they were written, some of the stories were translated,
Most of them were kind of directed more for children, but the villain's punishments are still in here, which always makes it interesting. But this is the one I'm reading right now. The book I have is in full copy full copy of the book. So no annotations or anything cut from it. In fact, they even left all the original spelling errors in this, so... But yeah, if you want to hear the Jack Sipe translations from the originals, they're all on my YouTube channel. Of course, I've got the original Brothers Grimm, I've got Norwegian Tales that were translated. I said, this is my 20th book. I've just been calling a book a series. So 20th book that I've read on Friday Night Fairy Tales. So I've read a lot of stories. And I've read enough of the different versions, I can usually point out what they've changed. So it's been interesting. Whereas my streams, if you go to the series, it's the ones that have all my commentary while I'm reading the stories. Whereas the other versions of it I have edited down, so it's just the story by itself. So, let me check something real quick. My YouTube channel currently has... My YouTube channel has 1,492 videos. And those are almost all story videos, except occasional clips I do of my friends. But it also has everything listed by playbooks. Well, playlists. I mean, I've even got one that I'm reading federal documents. But I also have all of the Arthur Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes stories. Dracula, Frankenstein, an actual book of the Mummy, a couple Edgar Allan Poe, a few Lovecraft. I do a lot of narrations in general. Just going by the Andrew Lang's Fairy Book series, there are 423 videos. But that's also including the 12 introductions that he's written in those too. And I have the Pokemon going during stream too. Andrew fairy books are fairy tales from around the world. So different countries, different translations. Most of the translations he has in the books are translated from other countries, either from French or German. So multiple translations really gives interesting terminology differences. And you can definitely tell when things are anglicized. And of course, like any good Uncle Fairy Tale storyteller, I do voices. So, our first fairy tale for this fabulous Friday night. Friday the 13th, but hopefully the fairies or gremlins won't interfere with the storytelling. Because they have been known to, especially on my streams. Little Less. There was once a little boy whose name was Lars, and because he was so little, he was called Little Lasse. He was a brave little man, for he sailed round the world in a pea-shell boat. It was summer-time, when the pea-shells grew long and green in the garden. Little Lasse crept into a pea-bed, where the pea-stalks rose high above his cap, and he picked 17 large shells, the longest and straightest that he could find. Little Lasse thought perhaps that no one saw him, but that was foolish, for God sees everyone. See what I mean by the being angelicized? Anyway. Then the gardener came with his gun over his shoulder, and he heard something rustling in his pea bed. I think it must be a sparrow, he said. Russ, Russ! But no sparrows flew out, for Little Lasse had no wings, only 2 small legs. Wait, I will load my gun and shoot the sparrows, said the gardener. Then Little Lasse was frightened and crept out on the path. Forgive me, Mr. Gardener, he said. I wanted to get some fine boats. Well, I will this time, said the gardener. But another time, Little Lasse, you must ask leave to go and look for boats in the pea bed. I will, answered Lasse, and he went off to the shore. Then he opened the pea shells with a pin, split them carefully in 2, and broke small bits of sticks for the rowers' seats. Then he took the peas which were in the shells and put them on his boats for cargo. Some of the shells got broken, and some were made whole. And when all were ready, Lasse had 12 boats. Then he should not be boats, they should be large warships. He had 3 liners, 3 frigates, 3 brigs, and 3 schooners. The largest liner was called Hercules. The smallest was called the Flea. Little Lasse put all the 12 into the water, and they floated as splendidly and as proudly as any great ship over the waves of the ocean. And now the ships must sail around the world. The great island over there was Asia, that large stone Africa, and the little island America. The small stones were Polynesia, and the shore from which the ship sailed out was Europe. The whole fleet set off and sailed far away over the parts of the world. The boats of the line steered a straight course to Asia, the frigates sailed to Africa, the brigs to America, and the schooners to Polynesia. But Little Lasse remained in Europe and threw small stones out into the great sea. Now there was one on the shore of Europe, a real boat, his father's own, a beautiful white-painted boat, and Little Lasse got into it. Father and Mother had forbidden this, but Little Lasse forgot. He thought he should very much like to travel to some other part of the world. I shall row out a little way, only a very little way, he thought. The pea-shell boats had traveled so far that they only looked like little specks on the ocean. I shall seize Hercules on the coast of Asia, said Lasse, and then row home to Europe. He shook the rope that held the boat, and Strange to say, the rope became loose. Dish, rash, a man is a man, and so little Lush manned the boat. Now he would row, and he could row, for he had rowed so often on the steps of home, when the steps pretended to be a boat and father's stick a big oar. But when little Lassie wanted to row, there were no oars to be found in the boat. The oars were locked up in the boathouse. Little Lassie had not noticed that the boat was empty. It is not so easy as one thinks to row to Asia without oars. What could little Lassie do now? The boat was already some distance out to sea, and the wind, which blew from land, was driving it still further out. Lassie was frightened and began to cry, but there was no one on shore to hear him. Only a big crow perched alone in the birch tree, and the gardener's black cat sat under the birch tree, waiting on the cat's little crow. Neither of them troubled themselves in the least about little Lassie, who was drifting out to sea. How little Lassie was now that... how sorry little Lassie was now that he had been disobedient and got into the boat, when Father and Mother had so often forbidden him to do so. Now it was too late. He could not get back to land. Perhaps he would be lost out on the great sea. What would he do? When he had shouted until he was tired and no one heard him, he put his two little hands together and said, "Good God, do not be angry with little Lassie." And then he went to sleep, for although it was daylight, old Nukumati was sitting on the shores of the land of Nod, and was fishing for little children with his long fishing rod. He heard the low words of little Lassie said to God, and immediately drew the boat to himself, and laid little Lassie to sleep on a bed of rose leaves. Then Nukumati said to one of the dreams, "Play with little Lassie, so that he does not feel lonesome." It was a little boy dream, so little that he was less than Lassie himself, and he had blue eyes and fair hair, and a red cap with a silver band, and a white coat with pearls on the collar. He came to little Lassie and said, "Would you like to sail around the world?" "Yes," said Lassie in his sleep, "I would like to." "Come then," said the dream boy, "let us sail in your pea-shell boats, and we shall sail in Hercules, and I shall sail the flea." So they sailed away from the land of Nod, and in a little while Hercules and the flea were on the shores of Asia, away on the other end of the world, where the ice sea flows through the Bering Straits into the Pacific Ocean. A long way off in the winter mists they could see the explorer, Norkenitskold, and his ship Vega trying to find an opening between the ice. It was so cold, so cold. The great icebergs glittered strangely, and the huge whales now lived under the ice, for they could not make a hole through with their awkward heads. All around on the dreary shore there was snow, and snow as far as the eye could see. Little gray men in shaggy coats moved about, and drove small sleds through the snowdrifts, but the sleighs were drawn by dogs. "Shall we land here?" asked the dream boy. "No," said little Lassie. "I'm so afraid that the whales would swallow us up, and the big dogs bite us. Let us sail instead to another part of the world." "Very well," said the dream boy in the red cap and the silver band. "Welcome in, Darth. Congrats on second." "Very well," said the dream boy with the red cap and the silver band. "It is not far to America." And at the same moment, they were there. The sun was shining, and it was very warm. Tall palm trees grew in long rows on the shore and bore coconuts in the top branches. Men, red as copper, galloped over the immense green prairies and threw their arrows at the buffaloes, who turned against them with their very sharp horns. An enormous cobra had crept into the stem of a palm tree and threw itself over a little llama that was gazing at the foot. Naps! It was all over for the little llama. There aren't cobras in the Americas. Oh well. "Where shall we land?" asked the dream boy. "No," said little Lassie. "I'm afraid that the buffaloes will butt us, and the great serpent eat us up. Let us travel to another part of the world." Very well, said the dream boy with the white coat. It is only a little way to Polynesia. And then they were there. It was very warm there, as warm as a hot bath in Finland. Costly spices grew on the shores, the pepper plant, cinnamon tree, gingers, saffron, the coffee plant, and the tea plant. Brown people with long ears and thick lips and hideously painted faces hunted the yellow-spotted tiger among the high bamboos on the shore, and the tiger turned on them and struck its claws into one of the brown men, and all the others took flight. They really don't know geography in this book. No, at least the kid doesn't. Shall we land here? Asked the dream boy. No, said little Lasse. Don't you see the tiger away there by the pepper plant? Let's travel to another part of the world. We can do so, said the dream boy with the blue eyes. We're not far from Africa, and as he said that, they were there. They anchored at the mouth of a great river where the shores were as green as the greenest velvet. A little distance from the river, an enormous desert stretched away. The air was yellow, and the sun shone so hot as if it would burn the earth to ashes, and the people were as black as the blackest jet. They rode across the desert on tall camels. The lions roared with thirst, and the great crocodiles with their gray lizard heads and their sharp white teeth gaped open out of the river. Shall we land here? Asked the dream boy. No, said the little Lasse. The sun would burn us, and the lions and crocodiles would eat us up. Let us travel to another part of the world. We can go back to Europe, said the dream boy with the fair hair, and with that, they were there. They came to a shore where it was all cool and familiar and friendly. There stood a tall birch tree with its drooping leaves. At the top sat the old crow, and at its foot crept the gardener's black cat. Not very far away was a house which little Lasse had seen before. Near the house there was a garden, and in the garden a pea bed with long pea shells. An old gardener with a green coat walked about and wondered if the cucumbers were ripe. Felix was barking on the steps, and when he saw little Lasse, he wagged his tail. Old Stenna was milking cows in the farmyard, and there was a very familiar lady in a check woolen shawl on her way to the bleaching green to see if her clothes were bleached. There was, too, a well-known gentleman in a yellow summer coat with a long pipe in his mouth. He was going to see if the reapers cut the rye. A boy and girl were running along the shore and calling out, little lass, come home for bread and butter. Shall we land here? Asked the dream boy, and he blinked his blue eyes roguishly. Come with me, and I shall ask Mother to give you some bread and butter and a glass of milk, said little Lasse. Wait a little, said the dream boy. And now little Lasse saw that the kitchen door was open, and from within there was heard a low, pleasant frizzling, like that which he had heard when one of the yellow whisks of batter in a wooden ladle into a hot frying pan. Perhaps we should go back to Polynesia now, said the little boy. No, they were frying pancakes in Europe just now, said little Lasse, and he wanted to jump to shore, but he could not. The dream boy had tied him with a chain of flowers so that he could not move, and now all of the little dreams came about him, thousands and thousands of little children, and they made a ring around him and sang a little song. This is going to be a pain. The world is very, very wide, little lass, and though you've sailed beyond the tide, you can never tell how wide it is on the other side. Little lass, you found it cold and hot. Little lass, but the no land is God not. Little lass, many men live here and there, but they're all cold to God our dear. Oh, man. I'm messing this up, seriously. Let me try it from the top. The world is very, very wide, little lass, lass. And though you've sailed beyond the tide, you can never tell how wide it is on the other side, lass, little lass. You have found a golden heart, little lass, lass. But in no land is God not, lass, little lass. Many men live here and there, but they all to God are dear, little lass, lass. When his angel is your God, little lass, lass, there is no harm can ever tide, even on the other side, where the wild beasts wander. But tell us now, where are you roam? Do not find the best is home of all the lands you've looked upon, lass, little lass. Yeah, if you feel like clipping my songs, feel free to. I probably have a playlist for them. When the dreams had sung their song, they skipped away, and Nukumati carried Les back to the boat. Here he lay for a long time quite still, and he still heard the frying pan frizzling at home on the fire, and the frizzling was very plain. Little Les heard it quite near him, and so he woke up and rubbed his eyes. There he lay in the boat where he had fallen asleep. The wind had turned, and the boat had drifted out with one wind and drifted in with another, while little Les slept. And what Les thought was frizzling in the frying pan was a low murmur of waves as they washed against the stones on the shore. But he was not altogether wrong, for the clear blue sea was like a great pan in God's sun that dry and make cakes all for good children. Little Les rubbed the sleep out of his eyes and looked around him. Everything was the same as before, the crow in the birch tree, the cat on the grass, and the pea-shell fleet on the shore. Some of the ships had floundered, and some had drifted back to land. Hercules had come back with its cargo from Asia, the flea had arrived from Polynesia, and the other parts of the world were just where they were before. Little Les could not know what to think. He had hidden so often been in the grotto in the land of Nod, he did not know what tricks dreams can play. But little Les did not trouble his head with such things. He gathered together his boats and walked up on shore to the house. His brother and sister ran to meet him and called out from the distance, "Where have you been so long, lassie? Come home and get some bread and butter." The kitchen door opened, and inside was heard the strange frizzling. The gardener was near his gate, watering the dill and parsley and carrots and parsnips. "Well," he said, "where was little Lassie been so long?" Little Lassie straightened himself up stiff and answered, "I've sailed around the world in a pea-shell boat." "Oh," said the gardener. He had forgotten about Dreamland. But you have not forgotten it. You know it still exists. You know the beautiful grotto and that bright silver walls whose luster never fades, and sparkling diamonds which never grow dim, the music which never ceases to flow, the soft murmur through the sweet evening twilight. The airy fairy dances of the happy dreamland never grow old. Like the glorious stars above us, they are always young. Perhaps you have caught a glimpse of their ethereal wings as they flew around your pillow. Perhaps you have met the same dream boy with the blue eyes and fair hair, the one who wore the red cap with a silver band and the white coat with pearls on the collar. Perhaps it has taken you to see all the countries of the world and the peoples, the cold wastelands, the burning deserts, the many-colored men and the wild creatures in the sea and the wild woods, so that you may learn many things, but gladly come home again. Yes, who knows? Perhaps you also have sailed around the world once in a pea-shell boat. Yeah, the mummy singing the Grinch was definitely an interesting one. uh, nice to know that there's another story that mentions the land of Nod. 25 minutes until ads. Yeah, I should be able to get this next one. So, our next wonderful story for this fabulous Friday night of fairy tales. Moti. Once upon a time there was a youth called Moti, who was very big and strong, but the clumsiest creature you can imagine. So clumsy was he that he was always putting his great feet into bowls of sweet milk and curds, which his mother set out on the floor to cool, always smashing, upsetting, breaking, until the last his father said to him, "Here, Moti, here are 50 silver pieces, which you are the savings of the years. Take them and go make your living or fortune if you can." Then Moti started off one early spring morning with his thick staff over his shoulder, singing gaily to himself as he walked along. In one way or another, he got along very well until a hot evening when he came to a certain city where he entered the traveler's serai, or inn, to pass the night. Now, a serai, you must know, is generally just a large square enclosed by a high wall, with an open colonnade along the inside, all around to accommodate both men and beasts, and with perhaps a few rooms and towers at the corners for those who are too rich or too proud to care about sleeping on their own camels or horses. Moti, of course, was a country lad and had lived with cattle all his life, and he wasn't rich and he wasn't proud. So he just borrowed a bed from the innkeeper and set it down outside an old buffalo who reminded him of home, and in 5 minutes he was fast asleep. In the middle of the night he awoke, feeling that he had been disturbed. Putting his hand under his pillow, found to his horror that his bag of money had been stolen. He jumped up quietly and began to prowl around to see whether anyone else seemed to be awake. But though he managed to rouse a few men and beasts from falling over them, he walked over the shadow of the archways round the whole serai without coming across the likely thief. He was just about to give up when he overheard two men whispering, and one laughed softly, and peering behind a pillar, he saw two Afghan horse dealers counting out his bag of money. Then Moti went back to bed. In the morning, Moti followed the two Afghans outside the city to the horse market, in which their horses were offered for sale. Choosing the best-looking horse among them, he went up to it and said, "Welcome in, Salty." No, Moti did not say that. "Is this horse for sale? May I try it?" And the merchants assenting, he scrambled up on its back, dug in its heels, and off they flew. Now, Moti had never been on a horse in his life. Well, doing pretty well. And had so much ado to hold on with both hands as well as with both legs that the animal just went where it liked, and very soon broke into a breakneck gallop and made straight back to the serai, where it had spent the night a few nights ago. This will do very well, thought Moti, as they whirled in at the entrance. As soon as the horse had arrived at a stable, it stopped on its own accord, and Moti immediately rolled off. But he jumped out at once and tied the beast up and called for some breakfast. Presently the Afghans appeared, out of breath and furious, and claimed the horse. "What do you mean?" cried Moti, with his mouth full of rice. "It's my horse. I paid you 50 pieces of silver for it. Quite a bargain, I'm sure." "Nonsense! This is our horse," answered one of the Afghans, beginning to untie the bridle. "Leave off!" shouted Moti, seizing his staff. "If you don't let my horse alone, I'll crack your skulls, you thieves. I know you. Last night you took my money, so today I took your horse. That's fair enough." Now the Afghans began to look a little uncomfortable, but Moti seemed so determined to keep the horse that they resolved to appeal to the law. So they went off and laid a complaint before the king that Moti had stolen one of their horses and would not give it up nor pay for it. Presently a soldier came to summon Moti to the king, and when he arrived he made his obeisance, and the king began to question him as why he had galloped off with the horse in this fashion. But Moti declared that he had got the animal in exchange for 50 pieces of silver, Most of the horse merchants vowed that the money they had on them was what they had received for the sale of other horses, and in one way or another the dispute got so confusing that the king, who really thought that Moti had stolen the horse, said at last, "Well, I tell you what I will do. I will lock something into this box before me. If he guesses what it is, the horse is his. If he doesn't, then it is yours." Kings had weird logic systems. To this, Moti agreed, and the king arose and went out alone by the little door at the back of the court, and presently came back clasping something closely wrapped in a cloth under his robe, and slipped it into the little box, and unlocked the box, and set it up where all might see. "Now," said the king to Moti, "guess." It happened that when the king had opened the door behind him, Moti had noticed that there was a garden outside. Without waiting for the king's return, he began to think what he had gotten out of the garden and small enough to shut in the box. Is it likely to be a fruit or a flower? No, not a flower this time. He clasped it too tight. Then it must be a fruit or a stone. But a stone he wouldn't wrap in a dirty stone in a nice clean cloth. Then it is a fruit, and a fruit without much scent, or he could not be afraid that I might smell it. But now what fruit without scent is in season right now? When I know that, I shall have guessed the riddle. And, as he had said before, Moti was a country lad and was accustomed to work in his father's garden. He knew all the common fruits, so he had really thought he ought to guess the right. But as to not let it seem too easy, he gazed up at the ceiling with a puzzled expression, and he looked down to the floor with an air of wisdom, and his fingers pressed against his forehead. And then he said slowly, with his eyes on the king, "It is freshly plucked, it is round and it is red. It's a pomegranate." Now, the king knew nothing about fruits except that they were good to eat, and for seasons he asked for whatever fruit he wanted whenever he wanted it, and saw that he got it. So to him, Moti's guess was like a miracle, and clear proof not only of his wisdom but of his innocence, for it was a pomegranate that he had put into the box. Of course, the king marveled and praised Moti's wisdom. Everyone else did so too, and whilst the Afghans went off crestfallen, Moti took the horse and entered into the king's service. Very soon after this, Moti, who continued to live in the Sarai, came back one wet and stormy evening to find that his precious horse had strayed. Nothing remained of him but a broken halter cord, and no one knew what had become of him. After inquiring of everyone who was likely to know, Moti seized the cord and his big staff and sallied out to look for him. Away and away he tramped out of the city and into the neighboring forest, tracking hoof marks in the mud. Presently it grew late, and still Moti wandered until suddenly, in the gathering darkness, he came right upon a tiger, who was contentedly eating his horse. "You thief!" shrieked Moti, and ran up, and just as the tiger, in astonishment, dropped a bone, whack came Moti's staff on his head, and it was such a good will that the beast was half stunned and could hardly breathe or see. And then Moti continued to shower upon him blow after blow and abuse, till the poor tiger could hardly stand, whereas his tormentor tied in the end of the broken halter around his neck and dragged him back to the Sarai. Interesting trade. "If you had my horse," he said, "I will at least have you. That's fair enough." And he tied him up securely by the head and heels, much as he would have tied up the horse, and then, the night being far gone, he flung himself beside him and slept soundly. You cannot imagine anything like the fright of the people in the Sarai when they woke up and found a tiger, very battered but still a tiger, securely tethered among themselves and their beasts. Men gathered up in groups talking and exclaiming, and finding fault with the innkeeper for allowing such a dangerous beast into the Sarai, and all the innkeeper was just as troubled as the rest. And none dared go near the place where the tiger stood blinking miserably to everyone, and where Moti had laid stretched out, snoring like thunder. At last news reached the king that Moti had exchanged his horse for a live tiger. Then the monarch himself came down, half disbelieving the tale, to see if it were true. Someone at last wakened Moti, and news that the royal master had come, and he rose yawning and was soon delighted, explaining and showing off his new possession. The king, however, did not share his pleasure at all, but called up a soldier to shoot the tiger, much to the relief of all the inmates of the serai, except Moti. The king, however, was before convinced that Moti was one of the wisest men, was now still more convinced that he was the bravest, and he increased his pay 100-fold, so that our hero thought that he was the luckiest of men. A week or two after this incident, the king sent for Moti, who on arrival found his master in despair. The neighboring monarch, he explained, had many more soldiers than he, and had declared war against him, and he was at wit's end, for he had neither money to buy him off, nor soldiers enough to fight him off. What was he to do? "If that is all, don't make trouble," said Moti. "Turn out your men, and I'll go with them, and we'll soon bring this robber to reason." The king began to revive hopes of these words, and took Moti off of his stable, and where he bade him choose for himself any horse he liked. There were plenty of fine horses in the stalls, but to our king's astonishment, Moti chose a poor little rat of a pony that was used to carry grass and water for the rest of the stable. "But why do you choose this beast?" said the king. "Well, you see, your majesty," replied Moti, "there are so many chances that it may fall off, and if I choose one of your big fine horses, I shall have so far to fall, and probably break my leg or my arm, if not my neck. If I fall off this little beast, I can't hurt myself much." A very comical sight was Moti when he rode out to war. The only weapon he carried was his staff, and to help him to keep his balance on horseback, he had tied each of his ankles to a big stone that nearly touched the ground as he sat astride the little pony. The rest of the king's cavalry were not very numerous, but they pranced along armor on fine horses. Behind them came a great rabble of men on foot, armed with all sorts of weapons, and last of all, the king with his attendants, very nervous and ill at ease. So the army started. They had not very far to go, but little Moti's pony, weighed with a heavy man and 2 big rocks, soon began to lag behind the cavalry, and would have lagged behind the infantry too, only they were not very anxious to be early in the fight, and hung back as to give Moti plenty of time. The young man jogged along more and more slowly for a time, till at last, getting impatient with the slowness of the pony, he gave him such a tremendous whack with his staff that the pony completely lost his temper and bolted. From one stone came untied and rolled away in a cloud of dust to one side, whilst Moti nearly rolled off too, but clasped his steed valiantly with its ragged mane and dropped his staff and held on for dear life. Unfortunately, the other rock broke away from his other leg and rolled thunderously down a neighboring ravine. Meanwhile, the advancing cavalry had barely time to draw one side when Moti came dashing and yelling bloodthirsty threats to his pony. "You wait till I get a hold of you! I'll skin you alive! I'll wring your neck! I'll break every bone in your body!" The cavalry thought this dreadful language was meant for the enemy, and were filled with admiration of his courage. Many of their horses were too upset by the whirlwind that galloped howling through their midst, and in a few minutes, after a little plunging and rearing and kicking, the whole troop were now following on Moti's heels. Far in advance, Moti continued his wild career. Presently in his course he came into a big field of castor oil plants, 10 or 12 feet high, big and bushy and quite green and soft. Hoping to escape from the back of his fiery steed, Moti grasped one in passing, but its roots gave way, and he dashed on, with the whole plant looking like a young tree flourishing in his grip. The enemy were in a battle array, advancing over the plain, their king confident with them and cheerful, when suddenly came the front a desperate rider in a furious gallop. "Sire, save yourself! The enemy is coming!" "What do you mean?" said the king. "Sire," panted the messenger, "fly at once! There's no time to lose. The foremost of the enemy rides a mad giant with a furious gallop. He flourishes a tree for a club and is wild in anger. Where he goes, he cries, 'You wait till I get a hold of you. I'll skin you alive. I'll wring your neck. I'll break every bone in your body.'" The other route is behind. You will do well to retire before this whirlwind of destruction comes upon you. Just then, a cloud of dust in the distance, the king saw Moti approaching at a hard gallop, looking indeed like a giant compared to the little beast he rode, whirling his castor oil plant, which in the distance might have looked like an oak tree, and the sound of his revelings and shoutings came down upon the breeze. Behind him, the cloud of dust and the sound of thunder of hoofs, whilst here and there flashed the glitter of steel. The sight and the sound struck terror into the king, and turning his horse, he fled at top speed, thinking that a regiment of yelling giants was upon him, and all his force followed him as fast as they might go. One fat officer alone could not keep up on foot with that mad rush, and as Moti galloped, he flung himself to the ground in abject fear. This was too much for Moti's excited pony, who shied, and suddenly that Moti went flying over his head like a skyrocket, and alighted right on top of his fat foe. Quickly regaining his feet, Moti began to swing his plant around his head and shout, "Where are your men? Bring them up, and I'll kill them! My regiments! Come on, the whole lot of you! Where is your king? Bring him to me! Here are my fine fellows coming up, and each will pull up a tree by the roots and lay you flat, and your houses and towns and everything else! Come on!" But the poor fat officer could do nothing but squat on his knees with his hands together, gasping. At last, when he caught his breath, Moti sent him off to bring his king and tell him that if he was reasonable, his life should be spared. Off went the poor man, and by the time the troops of Moti's side had come up and arranged themselves to look as formidable as possible, he returned with the king. The latter was very humble, apologetic, and promised never to make war, and pay a large sum of money, and altogether do what his conqueror wished. So armies on both sides went rejoicing home, and this was really the making of a fortune of clumsy Moti, who lived long in contrived ways to be looked up to as a fountain of wisdom, valor, and discretion by all except his relations, who could never understand what he had done to be considered so wise, wiser than anyone else. Oh, well. That is definitely stumbling into fortune. And, being big and riding a small horse would really make you look like a giant. And ads are up in 3 minutes. So, everyone, I'll see you after a bit. welcome back from the ads. I hope you got everything taken care of in the 3 minutes that Twitch allots for that kind of thing. But that was an interesting story. I kind of liked it. Oh, got another Irish deal coming up. Hey, Crimson. Welcome in. Glad you could make it. How about always getting off center on this thing? Hope you've been having a good week. I've got 2 stories done for the night. They're both kind of long. Minecraft? Cool. I really need to get back into Minecraft. I've been doing pretty good. I say I need to get back into Minecraft. I don't mean this way. Not sure how to add the ears. Yeah. I don't know why I got a Minecraft model. But I did find out how to paint it. So, anyway. I really don't remember when I got the Minecraft model. Probably got it very early on in my streaming. I really need to figure out how to get it into the game. I mean, it shouldn't be that hard. I mean, it's just a skin. But I haven't played Minecraft since... well, since I managed to tunnel through the world. I'm still not sure how that happened. But that's been a few years. Does not look like the cat has moved at all. Sweet sleepy baby. Okay, some stream I'm listening to is playing the Phineas and Ferb theme song. The new season. Yeah. Alright. Next story for this fabulous Friday night of fairy tales. Again, it is an Irish tale, so expect me to do bad accents prior to the show. Doesn't look like they will. No problem. We appreciate any lurkers in here. Besides, we wouldn't be telling fairy stories if we didn't expect people to fall asleep to them. It's gonna make sense. And I try not to make my voice too bad to keep people awake. Anyway. I'm not going to do the Cheops voice. I'm not going to sing a lullaby using it either. Unless someone donates to my coffee, perhaps. Yeah, I do have a coffee and I do requests, so if you really want me to do something weird, little coin wouldn't help. Well, little coin wouldn't hurt. Anyway, pre-wear item up. What the? Thank you, Sarybot, for picking it up. And thank you, Kel, for showing her Thorper's love. What? What's in my head? Anyway, our next fairy tale from the wonderful land of Erin, the Enchanted Deer. A young man was out walking one day in Erin, leading a stout cart horse by the bridle. He was thinking of his mother and how poor they were since his father, who was a fisherman, had been drowned at sea, and wondering what he should do to earn a living for both of them. Suddenly, a hand was laid on his shoulder, and a voice said to him, "Will you sell me your horse, son of the fisherman?" And looking up, he beheld a man standing in the road with a gun in his hand, a falcon on his shoulder, and a dog by his side. "What will you give me for my horse?" asked the youth. "Will you give me your gun, your dog, and your falcon?" "I will give them," answered the man, and he took the horse, and the youth took the gun, the dog, and the falcon, and went home with him. But when his mother heard what he had done, she was very angry, and beat him with a stick which she had in her hand. "That'll teach you to sell my property," she said, when her arm was quite tired. But Ian, her son, answered her nothing, and went off to his bed, for he was very sore. That night he rose softly, and left the house carrying the gun with him. "I will not stay here to be beaten," he thought, and he walked and walked and he walked till it was day again, and he was hungry, and looked about him to see if he could find anything to eat. Not very far off there was a farmhouse, so he went there and knocked at the door, and the farmer and his wife begged him to come in and share their breakfast. "I see that you have a gun," said the farmer as the young man placed it in the corner. "That is well, for a deer comes every evening to eat my corn, and I cannot catch it. It is fortunate that it is fortune that has sent you to me." "Oh, glad to remain and shoot the deer for you," replied the youth. And that night he hid himself and watched till the deer came into the cornfield. Then he lifted his gun to his shoulder, and just was going to pull the trigger when behold, instead of a deer, a woman with long black hair was standing there. At the sight, his gun almost dropped in his hand in surprise. But as he looked, there was a deer eating the corn again. And thrice this happened till the deer ran away over the moor, and the young man after her. On they went, on and on and on, till they reached a cottage which was thatched with heather. With a bound the deer sprang on the roof, and lay down where none could see her. But she did, so she called out, "Go in, fisher's son, and eat and drink while you may." So he entered and found food and wine on the table, but no man, for the house belonged to some robbers, who were still away at their wicked business. After Ian, the fisher's son, had eaten all he wanted, he hid himself behind a great cask. Very soon he heard a noise as the men coming through the heather, and the small twigs snapping under their feet. From his dark corner he could see into the room. He counted 24 of them, all big, cross-looking men. "Someone has been eating our dinner," they cried, "and there was hardly enough for ourselves." "It is a man who is lying under the cask," answered their leader. "Go and kill him, and then come and eat your food and sleep, for we must be off betimes in the morning." So 4 of them killed the fisher's son and left him, and then went to bed. By sunrise they were all out of the house, for they had far to go. And when they had disappeared, the door came off the roof to where the dead man lay, and she shook her head over him, and wax fell from her ears, and he jumped up as well as ever. "Trust me and eat as you did before, and no harm shall happen to you," said she. So Ian ate and he drank and fell sound asleep under the cask. In the evening robbers arrived very tired and crosser than they had been yesterday, for their luck had turned. They brought back scarcely anything. "Someone has eaten our dinner," cried. "It is a man under the barrel," answered the captain. "Let 4 of you go and kill him. But first slay the other 4 who pretended to kill him last night and didn't, because he is still alive." Then Ian was killed a second time, and after the rest of the robbers had eaten, they lay down and slept until morning. No sooner were their faces touched with the sun's rays than they were up and off. Then the deer entered and dropped the healing wax on the dead man, and he was as well as ever. By this time he did not mind what befell him, so sure he was that the deer would take care of him. And in the evening that which happened before happened again. 4 robbers were put to death, and the fisher's son also. But because there was no food left for them to eat, they were nearly mad with rage and began to quarrel. But quarreling they went on, and fighting so hard that by and by they were all stretched dead on the floor. Then the deer entered, and the fisher's son was restored to life, and bidding him to follow her, she ran on to a little white cottage where dwelt an old woman and a son, who was thin and dark. "Here I must leave you," said the deer, "but tomorrow meet me at midday in the church that is yonder." And jumping across the stream, she vanished into the wood. Next day he set out for the church, but the old woman of the cottage had gone before him, and had struck an enchanted stick called the Spike of Hurt in a crack on the floor, so that he would brush against it as he stepped across the threshold. Suddenly he felt sleepy that he could not stand up, and throwing himself on the ground, he sank into a deep slumber, not knowing that the dark lad was watching him. Nothing could waken him, not even the sound of sweetest music, nor the touch of a lady who bent over him. A sad look came to her face, and she saw it was no use, and at last she gave up. Lifting his arm, wrote her name across his side. "The daughter of the king of the town under the waves." "I will come tomorrow," she whispered, though he could not hear her, and she went sorrowfully away. Then he awoke, and the dark lad told him what had befallen him, and he was very grieved. The dark lad did not tell him the name that was written underneath his arm. On the following morning the fisher's son again went to the church, determined that he would not go to sleep whatever happened. But in his hurry he again touched the rod with his hand, and sank down where he stood, wrapped in slumber. A second time the air was filled with music, and the lady came in, stepping softly. But though she was laid his head on her knee, and combed his hair with a golden comb, his eyes could not open. Then she burst into tears, and placed the beautifully wrought box in his pocket, and she went away. Next day the same thing befell the fisher's son, and this time the lady wept more bitterly than before, for she said it was the last chance, and she would never be allowed to come any more. For home she must go. As soon as the lady had departed, the fisher's son awoke, and the dark lad told him of her visit, and how he would never see her again as long as he lived. At this the fisher's son felt a cold creeping up his heart, yet he knew not the fault had not been his that he had overslept. "I'll search the whole world, though I will find her," he cried, and the dark lad laughed at him as he heard him. But the fisher's son took no heed, and off he went, following the sun day after day, till his shoes were holes and his feet were sore from the journey. Not did he see but the birds that made their nests in the trees, not so much as a goat or a rabbit. On and on he went, and suddenly he came upon a little house, with a woman standing outside it. "All hail the fisher's son," said she. "I know what you are seeking. Enter and rest and eat, and tomorrow I will give you what I can to help, and send you on your way." Gladly did Ian the fisher's son accept her offer, and all that day he rested, and the woman gave him some ointment to put on his feet, which healed his sores. At daybreak he got up, ready to go, and the woman bade him farewell, saying, I have a sister who dwells on the road which you must travel. It is a long road, and it would take you a year and a day to reach it. But put on these old brown shoes with holes all over them, and you will be there before you know it. Then shake off and turn their toes to the known, and their heels to the unknown, and they will come home by themselves. The fisher's son did as the woman told her, and everything happened just as she had said. But at parting, the second sister said to him, she gave him another pair of shoes. Go to my third sister, for she has a son who is a keeper of birds in the air, and sends him to sleep when night comes. He is very wise, and perhaps he can help you. Then the young man thanked her and went to the third sister. The third sister was very kind, but had no counsel to give him, so he ate and drank and waited for her son to come home, after he had sent the birds to sleep. He thought a long while after his mother had told him the young man's story, and at last said that he was hungry and the cow must be killed, as he wanted some supper. So the cow was killed and the meat cooked in a bag made of its red skin. Now get in the bag, bid the son, and the young man got in and took his gun with him, but the dog and the falcon he left outside. The keeper of the birds drew the string to the top of the bag and left it to finish his supper. When in flew an eagle through the open door, and picked up the bag in her claws and carried it through the air to an island. There was nothing to eat on the island, and the fisher's son thought he would die from lack of food, when he remembered the box that the lady had put in his pocket. He opened the lid, and 3 tiny birds flew out, flapping their wings, and asked, Good master, is there anything we can do for thee? Bear me to the kingdom of the king under the waves, he answered, and one little bird flew on his head, and the other 2 perched on his shoulders, and he shut his eyes, and in a moment he was in the country under the sea. Then the birds flew away, and the young man looked about him, his heart beating fast as though he dwelt the lady whom he had sought all the world over. He walked on through the streets, and presently he reached the house of a weaver who was standing in the door, resting from his work. You're a stranger here in this plain, said the weaver, but come in, I will give you food and drink. And the young man was glad, for he knew not where to go, and they sat and talked till it grew late. Stay with me, I pray, for I love company and am lonely, observed the weaver at last, and he pointed to a bed in the corner where the fisher's son threw himself and slept until dawn. There's to be a horse race in town today, remarked the weaver, and the winner is to have the king's daughter to wife. The young man trembled with excitement at this news, and his voice shook as he answered, That will be a prize indeed. I would like to see the race. Oh, that is quite easy. Anyone can go, said the weaver. I would take you myself, but I have promised to weave this cloth for the king. That is a pity, returned the young man politely, but in his heart he rejoiced, for he wished to be alone. Leaving the house, he entered a grove of trees which stood behind, and took the box from his pocket, and raised the lid, and out flew the 3 little birds. Good master, what shall we do for thee? They asked, and he answered, Bring me the finest horse you have ever seen, and the grandest dress and glass shoes. Hear, hear, master, said the birds, and so they were. Never had the young man seen anything so splendid. Mounting the horse, he rode to the ground where the horses were assembled for the great race, and took his place among them. Many good beasts were there which had won many races, but the horse and the fisher's son left them all behind, for he was at the winning post. The king's daughter waited for him in vain to claim his prize, for he went back to the wood and got off his horse and put on his old clothes, and bade the box place some gold in his pockets. After that he went back to the weaver's house, and told him that the gold had been given him by a man who had won the race, and that the weaver might have it for his kindness to him. Now, as nobody had appeared to demand the hand of the princess, the king ordered another race to be run, and the fisher's son rode into the field, and still more splendidly dressed than before, and easily distanced everybody else. But again, he left the prize unclaimed, and so it happened on the third day, when it seemed as if all people in the kingdom were gathered to see the race, for they were filled with curiosity to know who the winner was. "If he will not come of his own free will, he must be brought," said the king, and messengers who had seen the face of the victor were sent to seek him in every street in town. This took many days, and when they at last found the young man in the weaver's cottage, he was so dirty and ugly and had a strange appearance that they declared he could not be the winner they were searching for, but a wicked robber who had murdered ever so many people, but had always managed to escape. "Yes, it must be the robber," said the king, when the fisher's son was led into his presence. "Build a gallows at once, and hang him in the sight of all my subjects, that he may behold him suffer the punishment for his crimes." So the gallows was put up on a high platform, and the fisher's son mounted the steps up to it, and turned at the top to make a speech that was expected from every due man, innocent or guilty. As he spoke, he happened to raise an arm. The king's daughter, who was there at her father's side, saw the name which he had written under it. With a shriek, she sprang from her seat, and the eyes of the spectators were turned towards her. "Stop! Stop!" she cried, hardly knowing what to say. "If that man is hanged, there is not a soul in the kingdom but shall die also." Well, that sounds confusing. If that, if that man is hanged here, is not a soul in the kingdom, but shall die also. And, running up to where the fisher's son was standing, she took him by the hand, saying, "Father, this is no robber or murderer, but the victor of the three races. He loosed the spells that were laid upon me." Then, without waiting for a reply, she conducted him into the palace, and he bathed in a marble bath, and all the dirt that the fairies had put on him had disappeared like magic. And when he had dressed himself in the finest garments the princes had sent to him, he looked the match for the king's daughter in Erin. He went down into the great hall where she was waiting him, and they had much to tell each other, but little time to tell it, for the king, her father, and the princes who were visiting him, and all the people in the kingdom were still in their places, expecting her to return. "How did you find me out?" she whispered as they went out to the passage. "The birds in the box told me," answered he, but he could say no more, as they stepped into the open spaces that were crowded with people. There the princess stopped. "O king," she said, turning towards him, "if one of you killed today, the rest would fly. But this man put his trust in me, and his head cut off 3 times. Because he has done this, I will marry him rather than one of you, who have come hither to wed me. For many kings have sought to free me from the spells, but none could do it, save Ian, the fisher's son." Okay. Ian seems to be a popular name in Irish fairy tales. Let's see. A little over half an hour. Yeah. Oh, this is Australian. That'll be interesting. This actually says an Australian folk tale. So, possibly expect more slightly bigoted comments. Because, fairy tales. "Hey, Cubine, what's up? How you been?" Let's say, how are all the cake bouncing drums going? There's a lot of bouncing. So I've got one that another friend had done for me a while back. But Yalicho did that one. I think he was doing a streamathon and was offering them to anyone who rated him. I rated him and forgot that he was doing that offer, so I ended up getting one. They said doing my tail was a challenge. But, you just gotta do up and down, same as you do everything else. I like your status. Panda, Ember, Necro, Towie, Leafy. I say, Blue Hope doing the shake's just funny. The cloak has a booty. That's side works too. So how many frames are you using in the animation? It's not bad. Yeah. I'm just glad that I'm able to do resizing on some of the programs I have. Of course, I wish I could actually draw decently. Animating, I don't have that much problem with because I'll just, slice models and reanimate them. Of course, I just use image ready, so not anything special. I could say a 22-year-old copy of image ready because it's like an Adobe package I got when I was going to University of North Texas. I paid $1,000 for 5 pieces of software, and I still use them. But they're not connected to Creative Cloud, so I don't have to follow Adobe's rules anymore. I think the only animation I've done is I did the moon phases. Mine's Adobe 6. Got the 6.1 upgrade. So, yeah. Good software. It lasts forever. I mean, it still works perfectly fine on Windows 10. So, keep using it. A little bit on Windows 11, you can tell it to act like Adobe's 10. I just keep thinking, all of the filters I've installed on that thing. Have you ever done any of the point over on Image Ready? Because I've done a few of those. I did some mouse over, going to different web page links. Of course, that's also like 20 years ago. Art rage? Yeah, that happens. I'm sure if I didn't have a wired controller, I'd probably have screen rage. Controllers are expensive. Not that my books aren't. I don't even want to think about how much I've spent on books. But I usually get them at discount. Because, I'm a bookseller. Well, online I am anyway. If it works, it works. No reason to change. That's like the art tablet I had briefly, I ended up giving to my niece. Because, she does a lot more art than I ever did. So. Of course, I'm trying to do more with fountain pens lately than anything else. Oh, God. The store's only 2 pages. auto freeze, or is it just my stream is slow? Okay, yeah. My stream's slow. Hey, Cubian, looks like you got something next to your name. Let's see. Questions on my page. Fish story. Okay, should be able to get 2 stories done. So, our next story, which I've mentioned is an Australian folktale. A fish story. Perhaps you'd think that fishes were always fishes, and never lived anywhere except in the water. But if you went to Australia and talked to the black people in the sandy desert in the center of the country, you would learn something quite different. They would tell you that long, long ago, you would have met fishes on the land, wandering from place to place and hunting all sorts of animals. And if you consider how fishes are made, you will understand how difficult this must have been and how clever they were to do it. Indeed, so clever were they that they might have been hunting still if a terrible thing had not happened. One day the whole fish tribe came back very tired from a hunting expedition and looked for a nice cool spot in which to pitch their camp. It was very hot, and they thought they could not find a more comfortable place than under the branches of a large tree which grew by the bank of a river. So they made their fire to cook some food right on the edge of the steep bank, which had a deep pool of water lying beneath it at the bottom. While the food was cooking, they all stretched themselves lazily out under a tree, and were just dropping off to sleep, when a big black cloud, which they had never noticed, spread over the sun, and heavy drops of rain began to fall, and so that the fire was almost put out, and that, is a very dangerous thing in savage countries where there are no matches, for it is very hard to light again. To make matters worse, an icy wind began to blow, and the poor fishes were chilled right through their bodies. "This will never do," said the Gage, the oldest of the fish tribe. "We shall die of cold unless we can light the fire again." And he bade his sons rub 2 sticks together in the hope of kindling a flame, but though they rubbed until they were tired, not a spark could they produce. "Let me try," cried Beluga, the bony fish, and he had no better luck. No more did Combo, the beam, nor any of the rest. "It is of no use," exclaimed Thuggai at last. "The wood is too wet. We must sit and wait until the sun comes out again and dries it." Then a very little fish indeed, not more than 4 inches long, and the youngest of the tribe, bowed himself before Thuggai, saying, "Ask my father Gurra the god to light the fire. He is skilled in magic more than the most fishes." So Thuggai asked him, and Gurra stripped some pieces of bark off a tree and placed them on top of the smoldering ashes. Then he knelt by the side of the fire and blew it for a long while, till slowly a feeble red glow became a little stronger, and the edges of the bark showed signs of curling up. When the rest of the tribe saw this, they pressed close, keeping their backs towards the piercing wind. But Guru told them they must go to the other side, as he wanted the wind to fan his fire. By and by a spark grew into a flame, and merry crackling was heard. "More wood!" cried Guru, and they all ran and gathered wood and heaps onto the fire, which leaped and roared and sputtered. "We shall be warm soon," said the people one to another. "Really, Guru is great." and they crowded around again, closer and closer. Suddenly, a shriek, a blast of wind swept down the hills and blew the fire out towards them. They sprang back and hurriedly, quite forgetting where they stood, and all fell down the bank, each tumbling over and over till they rolled into the pool that lay below them. Oh, how cold it was, that dark water on which the sun never shone. Then, in an instant, they felt warm again, for the fire, driven by the strong wind, had followed them right down to the bottom of the pool, where it burned as brightly as ever. And the fishes gathered round it, and as they had done on top of the cliff, they found the flames as hot as before, and that the fire never went out like those upon land, but kept burning forever. So now you know why that if you dive deep down in the cold surface of the water on a frosty day, you will find it comfortable and pleasant underneath, and be quite sorry that you cannot stay there. Yeah, that story sounds a little fishy to me. Okay, last one from Fairy Tales and Traditions of the South of Ireland. Our final tale for this Friday night of fairy tales. The Wonderful Tune. Maurice Connor was the king, and that's no small word, of all the pipers in Munster. He could play jig and reel without end, and Ollistrum's march and the eagle's whistle and the hen's concert, and odd tunes of every sort and kind. But he knew one far more surprising than the rest, which had it in the power to set everything dead or alive dancing. In a way he learned it is beyond my knowledge, for he was mighty cautious about telling how he came by such a wonderful tune. At the very first note of that tune, the shoes began shaking upon the feet of all who heard it, old and young it mattered not, just as the shoes had to argue. Then the feet began going and going and going from under them, and at last, and away with them, dancing like mad, whisking here and there and everywhere like a straw in a storm. There was no halting while the music lasted. Not a fair, nor a wedding, nor a feast in the 7 parishes round was counted worth speaking of without blind Maurice and his pipes. His mother, poor woman, used to lead him about from one place to another, just like a dog. Down through Ivor, Maurice Connor and his mother were taking their rounds. Beyond all places, Ivor is a place of stormy coasts and steep mountains, as proper a spot as it may be in Indian Ireland to get yourself drowned, or your neck broken on the land, should you prefer that. But, notwithstanding the Ballinskill Bay, there was a neat bit of ground, well fitted for diversion, and down from it, towards the water, was a clean, smooth piece of strand, the dead image of the calm seas in the moonlight night, with just a curl of the waves upon it. Here it was that Marcy's music had brought from all parts a great gathering of young men and young women, for 'twas not every day that the strand at Trafalgar was stirring up by the voice of a bagpipe. The dance began, as pretty a dance as it ever was danced. Brave music, everyone said, and well done, when Maurice stopped. More to your elbow, Maurice, and fair winds to the bellows, cried Paddy Dorman, a humpbacked dancer master who was there to keep order. 'Tis a pity, he said, that we'd let the piper run dry after such music. 'Twould be a disgrace at Ivor that didn't come on it since that week of 3 Sundays. So, as well became him, for he was always a decent man, says he. Do you drink, piper? I will, sir, said Maurice, answering the question on the safe side, for you never know yet a piper or schoolmaster who refused to drink. What will you drink, Maurice? Said the Paddy. I'm no ways particular, said Maurice. I'll drink anything barring raw water, if it's all the same to you. Mr. Dorman, maybe you would lend me the loan of a glass of whisky. I've no glass, Maurice, said Paddy. I've only the bottle. Let that be no hindrance, answered Maurice. My mouth just holds a glass and the drop, often as I've tried it, sure. So Paddy Dorman trusted him with the bottle. Poor fool he was, and to his cost he found that though Morrow's mouth might not hold as much of a glass at one time, yet, owing to the hole in his throat, it took many a filling. That was no bad whiskey bottle either, said Maurice, handing back the empty bottle. By the holy frost, then, says Paddy, what is cold comfort there's in the bottle now, and 'tis your word we must take for the strength of the whiskey, for you've left us none to sample to judge by. And, to be sure, Maurice had not. Now I need not tell any gentleman or lady that if he or she was to drink an honest bottle of whiskey at one pull, it is not at all the same as drinking a bottle of water, and in the course of my whole life I never knew more than 5 men who could do so without being the worse. Of these, Maurice Connor was not one, though he had a stiff word that says, "When liquor's in, sense is out," and puff, at a breath he was blasting out his wonderful tune. 'Twas really then beyond all belief in telling the dancing. Maurice himself could not hold quiet, staggering now on one leg, now on the other, and rolling like a ship in a sea across, trying to humour the tune. There was his mother, too, moving her old bones as light as the youngest girl of them. But her dancing, no, nor the dancing of all the rest, is not worthy of speaking about to the work that was going down the strand. Every inch of it was covered with all manner of fish, jumping and plunging about to the music, and every moment more and more would tumble out of the water, charmed by the wonderful tune. Crabs of monstrous size spun around and around on one claw with the nimbleness of a dancing master, and twirled and tossed their claws about like the limbs that did not belong to them. It was a sight to behold. But perhaps you have heard of Father Florence Conry, a pleasant man, of one who would wish to drink with this hot summer's day, and he had rhymed out all the dancing fishes so neatly that it would be 1,000 pities to not to give you his verse. So here they are, in English. The big seals in motion, like waves in the ocean, her gouty feet prancing came heading the gay fish, crabs, lobsters, and crayfish, determined on dancing. The sweet sounds they followed, the gasping cad swallowed. 'Twas wonderfully, really, the turbot and the flounder, mid-fish were the rounder, that just capered as gaily. Jandories came tripping, dull baked by the skipping. The frisk it seemed given, bright mackerel went spinning, like small rainbows winging their flight up to heaven. The whiting in the haddock, the saltwater haddock, this dance to be put in, where skates with that flat fins, edged out of some old places, but souls keep their footing. Sprats and herrings and powers, oh, silvery showers, a number outnumbered, a great lane so lengthy, there was such a plenty, the shore was encumbered. The scallop and the oyster, 2 shells did roister, like castanets flitting, while limpets proved clearly, the rocks very nearly laughter were splitting. Never such a hullabaloo in this world. Before or since was as if heaven and earth were coming together, all after Maurice Connor's wonderful tune. In the height of all these doings, what should there be dancing among the outlandish set of fishes, but a beautiful young woman, as beautiful as the dawn of day. She had a cocked hat upon her head. From under it her long green hair, just the colour of the sea, fell down behind, while at the hindrance to her dancing. Her teeth were like rows of pearls, her lips from all the world looked like red coral, and she had a shining pale green gown, as hollow as the wave, with little rows of purple and red seaweed settled upon it. For you never saw a lady yet under the water or on the water who had not a good notion of dressing herself out. She danced at last to Maurice, who was flinging his feet from under him as fast as hops, for nothing in this world could keep still while that tune of his was going on, and says she to him, chanting out in a voice as sweet as honey, "I'm a lady of honour who live in the sea. Come down, Maurice Connor, and be married to me. Silver plates and gold dishes you shall have, and shall be king of the fishes when we are married to me." Drink was strong in Maurice's head, and now he chanted in return for her great civility. It is not every lady, maybe, that would be after making such an offer to a blind piper. Therefore 'twas only right in him to give her as good as she gave herself. So says Maurice. I've obliged you, madam. Offered gold fish and dish or plate. If the king and I had 'em, I would dine in great state. With your own father's daughter, I'd be sure to agree. But to drink the salt water wouldn't do so with me. The lady looked at him, quite amazed, and swinging her head from side to side like a great scholar. Well, says she, Maurice, if you're not a poet, where is the poetry to be found? It was this way they kept on at it, framing high compliments, one answering the other, and their feet going with the music as fast as their tongues. All the fish kept dancing too. Maurice heard the clatter and was afraid to stop playing, lest it might be displeasing to the fish, and not knowing what so many of them may take up into their heads, do to him, if they got vexed. Well, the lady in the green hair kept coaxing Maurice with soft speeches, till at last she overpersuaded him to promise to marry her, and be the king over fishes, great and small. Maurice was well fitted to be their king, if they wanted one that would make them dance, and surely he would drink, barring salt water, with any fish of them all. When Maurice's mother saw him with that unnatural thing in the form of a green-haired lady as his guide, and he and she drinking down together and loving to the water's edge, through the thick of fishes, she called out after him to stop and come back. Oh, then, she says, as if with not a widow enough before, there he is going away from me to be married to that scaly woman. And who knows but his grandmother I may take a hired card. Help me and pity me, but 'tis a mighty unnatural thing, and maybe it's just boiling and eating my own grandchildren. I'll be with a bit of salt butter, and not knowing it. Oh, Maurice, Maurice, if there's any love of nature left in you, come back to your own old mother, who reared you like a decent Christian. Then the poor woman began to cry, and sobbed so finely that it would do anyone good to hear her. Maurice was not long getting to the rim of the water. There he kept playing and dancing, as if nothing was the matter, and the great thundering wave coming in towards him, ready to swallow him up alive. But as he could not see, he did not fear it. His mother, who saw it plainly through big tears, were rolling down her cheeks, and though she saw it, and her heart was aching as much as ever a mother's heart ached for a son, she kept dancing, dancing all the time for the bear of her life. Certain it was she could not help it, for Maurice never stopped playing that wonderful tune of his. He only turned his ear to the sound of his mother's voice, fearing it might put him out of his steps, and all the answer he made back was, Lost with you, mother. Sure, I'm going to be king over the fishes down in the sea, and for a token of luck and a sign that I'm alive and well, I'll send you in, every 12 months on this day, a piece of burned worm, from Tranfresca. Maurice had not the power to say a word more, for the strange lady with the green hair, seeing the wave just upon them, covered him with herself in a thing like a cloak with a big hood on it, and the wave came curling over twice as high as their heads, burst upon the strand, with a rush and a roar that might be heard as far as Cape Clear. That day, 12 months, the piece of burned wood came ashore at Trafasco. It was a queer thing for Maurice to think of sending all the way from the bottom of the sea. A gown or a pair of shoes would have been something like a present for his poor mother. But he had said it and kept his word. A bit of burned wood regularly came ashore on the appointed day, as for good. Aye, it's better 100 years. The day is now forgotten, and maybe that is the reason why people now say Maurice Connor had stopped sending his love token to his mother. Poor woman, she did not live to get as much as one of them, for what thoughts of loss of Maurice and the fear of eating her own grandchildren. She died in 3 weeks after the dance. Some say it was fatigue that killed her, but whichever it was, Mrs. Connor was decently buried with her own people. Seafaring people have often heard, off the coast of Kerry, on a still night, the sounding music coming up from the water, and some who have good ears could plainly distinguish Maurice Connor's voice singing these words to his pipes. Beautiful shore, the spreading stand, the crystal water and diamond sand, never would I have parted from thee, but for the sake of my fair laddie. Yay! Ugh. So, an actual mermaid came on land, not a selkie. Cool. I didn't think they really would do regular mermaids in Ireland, because I knew selkies are Irish and Scottish. I mean, there's not that far to swim between the islands. But anyway. We need to find some... It is not giving me any pauses today. That's crazy. But anyway. Who is on that we can raid? What would we like to raid into? Do we want to raid into arcs? Do we want to raid into stories? If anyone has a preference, by all means, let yourself be known. For those here. Oops, I can type on my screen. It's my follower read message and my subscriber read message, which of course you can use if you follow. Just toss a couple of pages at the redeems. Anyone try? Let's go ahead and write dust just for the hell of it. Good night, everyone. Hopefully I will see you Monday for some more Baldur's Gate. Night.
In the hollow of the night, shadows weave and twist. The wolf has told his stories, wrapped in mystic mist, lurking in the silence where the echoes softly play. The echoes of forgotten tales, dimming as they sway. The hours drip like candle wax, slowly melting gold. Lands of frost and twilight, secrets yet untold. The forest breathes a shiver, its ancient heartbeats thrum. Underneath the silver glow, the wild whispers come. Time to close the book, let the pages